17 cameras, one marble seal, and a silence that felt like a trap. The Senate hearing on ethics and influence was supposed to be routine: statements, soundbites, adjourn. Then the doors opened and Denzel Washington stepped in, unannounced to viewers but invited as a citizen advocate. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He set a slim black folder on the witness table, looked straight down the dais at Senator John Kennedy, and said into the mic, "Oaths are promises with receipts. If the receipts say you served yourself, not the people, that's not representation. That's betrayal." A gasp rippled across the room. The internet detonated on cue. Kennedy leaned back, lips pursed with that leisurely drawl the evening show's love. "Now son," he said, patting the air like he was tamping down a fire, "you're an actor. This here is government. We deal in facts, not monologues." Denzel flipped open the folder without breaking eye contact. Pages of highlighted lines, public filings, meeting logs, earmark notes, glinted under the lights. "Facts," he repeated. "Good. Then let's talk about patterns anyone can verify. Votes that line up perfectly with donor interests. Aides who leave on Friday and lobby your office on Monday. Constituents told to wait while checks get walked to the front of the line." He raised a page. No accusations, just arithmetic. Kennedy's smile tightened. "You sure do love big words for a man with no committee seat." "Don't need a seat to see a sellout," Denzel said, voice low as a gavel. "I grew up taught that service means sacrifice. But somewhere between the green room and the cloakroom, service started meaning access. The public pays twice, once with taxes, once with trust." Chairs creaked. Staffers froze. The chairman cleared his throat and failed to find his script. Denzel tapped the mic once. "Senator, this isn't Hollywood. This is a hospital bill, a flooded parish, a factory that never reopened. When power treats pain as a talking point, people bleed off camera." Kennedy's knuckles whitened on the desk. "Careful now. You toss around that word, betrayal, like confetti." "It's not confetti," Denzel said, sliding the folder forward. "It's a mirror. Look into it." Shorthand pen skated. Feeds spiked. And for the first time that morning, the dais looked less like a fortress and more like a stage with the lights too bright for comfort. The chairman's gavel struck twice, but the sound was drowned out by the low rumble of murmurs from the press benches. Every reporter smelled blood. Kennedy leaned forward now, chin lifted, smile thin as glass. "Mr. Washington, I understand you like drama. But you don't get to stroll in here and brand a senator a criminal on national television. That dog won't hunt." Denzel didn't flinch. His voice carried, steady, measured, as if he had rehearsed restraint more than lines. "Nobody said criminal. I said betrayal. Betrayal is when a senator swears to serve the people of Louisiana, then uses that seat to fatten his own circle while schools close and levees crack. Betrayal is when the ones who elected you eat scraps while your donors eat steak." The audience, mostly aides, clerks, and a few stunned citizens in the gallery, shifted uncomfortably. Phones shot upward, recording every second. Kennedy chuckled, a hollow sound meant to signal control. "You think you can out-talk me in my own chamber? Boy, I've debated governors and professors twice your age." Denzel leaned forward, closing the space. "And yet it's not their names in these filings." He tapped the folder again, crisp against the table. "It's yours. Lobbyist dinners logged the same day you voted down relief bills. Corporate PAC checks within hours of committee hearings. That's not coincidence. That's choreography." Kennedy's eyes narrowed, his drawl sharpening into a blade. "You're playing with fire, son. You smear my name, you smear this institution." The camera lights glared hotter. Denzel's reply landed like a body blow: "This institution doesn't get smeared by the truth. It gets smeared by men who confuse public office with personal ATM machines." Gasps broke across the room, louder this time, almost theatrical. One senator muttered under his breath, Kennedy slammed his palm on the desk. You don't lecture me about patriotism. Denzel's eyes didn't waver. Patriotism isn't a punchline, Senator. It's accountability. And if that word makes you sweat, maybe you've forgotten which side of the oath you're on. The gallery erupted, half in shocked silence, half in quiet applause muffled by the gavel that tried again, uselessly, to restore order. Kennedy finally leaned back, forcing his lips into the ghost of a grin, but the twitch at his temple betrayed the effort. Son, he began, voice dipping into that syrupy cadence he used for campaign rallies, you're out of your league. These are complex appropriations, multi-layered decisions. What looks like influence to you is governance. You think you found a smoking gun? All you've got is a stack of paper and a talent for theatrics. Denzel placed both palms on the desk, slow, deliberate, like someone grounding himself before lifting weight. Theatrics? Theatrics is standing in front of a camera and telling people you fight for them while pocketing checks from the industries poisoning their water. Theatrics is shaking hands at churches on Sunday, then voting Monday to cut their food programs. If that's governance, Senator, then maybe the dictionary needs rewriting. The room stiffened. Kennedy tried to laugh again, but this time it came out brittle. I've been elected more times than you've been nominated. These people trust me. Denzel tilted his head, eyes like steel. Elections aren't a blank check. They're a contract. And every contract breaks when the terms are violated. You don't get to call it trust when it's really silence bought by fear, fatigue, or distraction. The words hung heavy, slicing through the air like a courtroom verdict. Staffers scribbled furiously, journalists whispered like vultures circling a fresh wound. Kennedy bristled, pointing a finger across the chamber. You don't understand what it takes to lead. To negotiate. Sometimes compromise looks ugly. Compromise, Denzel shot back, is when two sides give. Corruption is when one side gets everything while the other side gets excuses. Call it what it is. A murmur of approval rippled from the gallery, a smattering of claps quickly hushed by security. Kennedy slammed his chair back into place, face flushed now. You think you're righteous? You think you can humiliate me in my own house? Denzel's voice dropped, calm and dangerous. I'm not here to humiliate you, Senator. You've done that yourself. I'm here to remind America that betrayal wears a suit and tie, smiles for cameras, and still robs them blind. The chamber fell silent. Even the gavel refused to break the moment. Kennedy's jaw clenched as if he were chewing gravel. He tried one last time to reel the hearing back under his control. Mr. Washington, he said, his voice carrying that forced calm politicians use when they're bleeding but don't want the crowd to see, your confusing passion for proof. If you had real evidence of wrongdoing, you wouldn't need the spotlight. You'd be in a court of law. This, he swept his hand toward the cameras, this is theater. Denzel didn't blink. He let the silence stretch just long enough for the cameras to close in. Theater is pretending poverty is solved because you cut a ribbon at a food bank. Theater is promising veterans better care while you dine with the same companies denying them coverage. Evidence? The evidence is in the lives outside this building. You want court documents? Fine. But the people don't live in courtrooms, they live in debt, in waiting rooms, in neighborhoods still drowning from storms you voted against funding. That's the verdict. Gasps erupted again, sharper this time. A reporter's pen snapped in half from the pressure of frantic notes. Kennedy's knuckles tightened on his microphone. You better watch yourself. You don't sit in this chair. You don't carry the weight I carry. Denzel leaned forward, his voice low but slicing. Weight? The only weight I see is the gold in your campaign coffers. The weight of favors traded in back rooms while Americans carry the real burden. Don't talk to me about heavy loads, Senator. Try burying a friend because they couldn't afford insulin. Try explaining to a child why their school closed while corporate lobbyists bought another yacht. The gallery stirred, one woman shouted, "Tell it," before being hushed. Kennedy's composure cracked for the first time, his face reddening as he fired back. You don't know me. You don't know what it takes to survive in politics. Denzel's reply came fast, clean. Survive? Public office isn't about your survival. It's about ours. And when survival becomes self-preservation, you stop being a leader and start being a liability. The air turned electric. Every camera zoomed tighter. For the first time, Kennedy had no retort ready. Kennedy shifted in his chair, pulling at his collar like the heat in the chamber had spiked 10 degrees. He forced a smirk, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Son, you sure know how to deliver lines. Maybe Hollywood raised you right for the stage. But this isn't a movie, and I don't answer to actors. Denzel didn't flinch. He kept his posture calm, his tone steady, but his words landed like hammer blows. No, Senator. You answer to voters. And the last time I checked, those voters aren't asking for another performance. They're asking why the roads in their towns look like war zones while your donors' companies cash government contracts. They're asking why hospital beds are closing while your campaign account grows fat. That's not politics. That's profiteering. The gallery hummed with restless energy. Kennedy laughed again, louder this time, trying to drown out the weight of the accusation. You don't know what it's like in this chamber. Deals keep the country running. Without compromise, nothing moves. You think you're the first outsider to march in here wagging your finger? Denzel raised his hand, not to silence Kennedy, but to draw every eye. His voice carried across the room with razor-sharp clarity. This isn't about compromise. This is about integrity. There's a difference between finding middle ground and selling out the ground people stand on. You talk about deals? Who benefits from those deals, Senator? Not the mother in Baton Rouge choosing between rent and medicine. Not the farmer in Shreveport fighting drought. Not the veteran waiting 6 months for care. No, the beneficiaries sit in the same leather chairs you're defending right now. Kennedy's fists balled against the desk. Careful, he hissed, his southern drawl no longer charming, but raw and venomous. You're stepping on sacred ground. Denzel leaned in, eyes steady, voice calm as ever. Sacred ground isn't this chamber, Senator. Sacred ground is the promise you made to every American when you swore your oath. And you've trampled it. The silence that followed wasn't respectful. It was suffocating. Every person in that room knew a line had been crossed, and there was no way to walk it back. Kennedy's eyes darted toward the cameras, searching for some sign of support, but the lenses were merciless. They captured every bead of sweat on his forehead, every twitch in his jaw. He tried to recover, squaring his shoulders. You think you can come in here, lecture me, and walk away clean? I've spent decades fighting for this country. I've got scars you'll never understand. Denzel folded his hands on the desk, calm but commanding. Scars? Don't mistake self-inflicted wounds from greed for battle scars. The real scars are out there, on the faces of families you failed, on the workers crushed by policies you championed, on veterans stitched together by broken promises. You claim decades of service, Senator. I see decades of survival, for yourself. The crowd shifted, whispers rising like wind before a storm. Reporters angled closer, sensing blood in the water. Kennedy's tone hardened. You're an outsider. You don't know the sacrifices, the nights spent bargaining for 1 inch of progress. It's easy to sit on a high horse when you've never had to dirty your hands. Denzel's reply came sharp, unflinching. Dirty hands? There's a difference between soil under your nails from building something and blood on your hands from selling people out. Don't confuse labor with corruption. And don't confuse sacrifice with self-preservation. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Someone muttered, he said it, and others nodded silently. Kennedy's face flushed deep red. He slammed his fist against the desk. I won't be slandered in my own chamber. Denzel didn't raise his voice. That calm was what made it sting more. Slander is a lie told with malice. This is truth spoken with restraint. And if the truth feels like an attack, maybe it's because it hits too close. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Even Kennedy's allies avoided his eyes. For the first time in the hearing, it was clear, the tide had turned. Kennedy adjusted his tie with a shaky hand, trying to summon the confidence he had rehearsed for years. But the cracks were showing, and everyone in the chamber could see it. You think you can shame me, Mr. Washington? You think words erase decades of leadership? I've stood through tougher storms than this circus. His voice wavered, half anger, half desperation. Denzel tilted his head slightly, almost pitying. Storms? The only storm here is the one you created. Leadership isn't measured by how long you sit in a chair, it's measured by whether people are better off when you leave it. And right now, Senator, the people you claim to serve are drowning while you're busy patching holes in your yacht. The audience erupted in murmurs, some outright laughter at the cutting metaphor. Kennedy's mouth tightened, but he pressed on. You don't know the cost of this job. The endless compromises, the backroom talks, without them, this nation would collapse. Denzel leaned forward, eyes locked. The nation doesn't collapse from too little compromise. It collapses from too little courage. And courage, Senator, is telling your donors no. Courage is putting a mother's hospital bill above a corporation's tax break. Courage is standing on principle, even if it costs you your seat. But you? You've mistaken cowardice for pragmatism, and America's paid the bill. A gasp shot through the chamber. Kennedy tried to interject, but Denzel cut him off cleanly. You talk about cost? Let's count it. Closed schools. Underfunded hospitals. Communities gutted while boardrooms bloom. That's the receipt of your so-called service. And the people, your people, they've had enough. The room froze. Kennedy's lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, the senator who prided himself on always having a retort was mute. Reporters scribbled like their pens were on fire. Denzel sat back, not triumphant, but steady, as if the truth had finally been set free in a room that had suffocated without it. Kennedy gripped the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. The cameras caught everything, his forced smile, the tremor in his jaw, the sweat clinging to his brow. You think this grandstanding makes you a patriot? He spat, his southern drawl now sharp, almost venomous. You're just another loud voice trying to burn down what men like me built. Denzel didn't blink. His calm was almost unnerving, a steady flame against Kennedy's sputtering fury. What men like you built? He let the words hang, heavy. You built ladders with missing rungs, walls with locked doors, and systems designed to keep power in the same hands, yours. That's not building for America. That's building a fortress for yourself. The crowd erupted, some gasping, some clapping, others whispering with wide eyes. Kennedy's composure cracked further. He pointed a trembling finger at Denzel. Careful, son. You don't understand the forces at play. This game is bigger than you. Denzel leaned forward, his voice low but razor sharp. You're right, it is bigger than me. It's about every worker cheated out of fair pay, every student saddled with debt while you line your campaign chest, every family told to wait their turn while you cash your checks. Don't lecture me about forces, Senator. The only force at play here is greed, and you've mistaken it for governance. The studio air felt electric. Kennedy tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. This is politics, Mr. Washington. You can't win without deals. Without allies. Without bending. Denzel's reply sliced through the silence. Then maybe the system is broken if it requires selling your soul to keep your seat. And maybe it's time people stop mistaking survival in the swamp for leadership on the hill. A woman in the gallery shouted, "Say it louder." Applause followed, raw and unplanned. Kennedy looked cornered, like a man realizing the very stage he'd ruled for years was slipping from under him. The tide wasn't just turning, it had swallowed him whole. Kennedy's face darkened, his carefully polished image unraveling in real time. He slammed his palm against the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the chamber. You think you're better than me? He barked, his voice cracking. You think sitting here throwing stones makes you righteous? You've never carried the burden I have. You've never had the weight of a state, a nation, on your shoulders. Denzel didn't flinch. He waited for the noise to settle, then spoke with a controlled precision that cut sharper than any outburst. The weight of a state? No, Senator. What you've carried is the weight of your own ambition. And every time it got heavy, you passed the cost down, to the people who trusted you, to the taxpayers who footed the bill, to the families who now scrape by while you smile from fundraisers. The audience stirred. The sound was no longer whispers but a current of discontent rolling through the room. Kennedy shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. He tried to sneer. You think you speak for them? You're an actor. You live in mansions, walk red carpets. Don't pretend you know their pain. Denzel leaned forward, his voice steel. I've never claimed to be perfect, Senator. But here's the difference. You make laws that decide whether a family eats or starves, whether a soldier's widow gets help or gets ignored. And in those moments, you didn't choose them. You chose yourself. That isn't leadership, it's betrayal. Gasps echoed. Reporters looked at one another, scribbling frantically. Kennedy opened his mouth to reply, but his voice faltered, catching in his throat. For the first time, the chamber saw him not as a powerful senator but as a cornered man. His authority cracked, his arrogance exposed. Denzel's words landed like a hammer. You sit in this chamber draped in tradition, but tradition without honor is just theater. And today, Senator, the mask slipped. The people can finally see who you really are. The silence was suffocating. Even Kennedy's allies avoided his gaze. His legacy wasn't just questioned, it was crumbling before the cameras, piece by piece. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Kennedy tried to muster something, anything, that resembled control, but the weight of Denzel's words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. His lips trembled around half-formed sentences, his eyes darting from the cameras to the faces in the audience, searching for an ally. None came. Even the reporters, who once treated him like untouchable royalty, had shifted their gaze, pens and cameras locked instead on Denzel. Then, breaking the stillness, Denzel rose from his chair. His movement was deliberate, every step punctuated by purpose. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat. He simply stood tall, his presence commanding the chamber in a way Kennedy never truly had. Senator, he said calmly, for years you've convinced this country that survival of your career meant survival of our democracy. But today, America sees the truth. You haven't been protecting us, you've been protecting yourself. The crowd erupted, cheers, shouts, applause thundering against the walls. Some people stood, others banged the railings, their energy raw, unrestrained. Kennedy shrank back, his figure diminished against the wave crashing over him. He attempted to smirk, to play it off as theater, but his eyes betrayed him. They weren't the eyes of a man in control, they were the eyes of a man exposed. Denzel didn't look at the cameras, didn't even glance Kennedy's way again. He turned slightly toward the audience, his expression firm but composed. Leadership isn't about building monuments to yourself. It's about building bridges for others. And if that's too much to ask, then maybe it's time to step aside for those who still remember who they serve. The chamber roared, the sound vibrating like thunder. Kennedy slumped into his chair, shoulders heavy, hands trembling as if the very weight of his career was pressing him down. For decades, he had believed he could weather any storm. But this wasn't a storm, it was a reckoning. As the camera zoomed in on Kennedy's hollow stare, one truth was clear: this moment would follow him forever. And Denzel, calm and unyielding, had etched his name into a different kind of history, one not written in the shadows of power, but in the clarity of truth. What we witnessed here today wasn't just a debate. It was the moment the masks came off and the truth walked onto the stage. For years, men like Kennedy have held on to power while forgetting the very people they swore to serve. But the game is over. Because once the truth is spoken, it can't be unheard. Share this, talk about it, argue about it, because silence is betrayal, but speaking truth is always freedom.